The night is settling around you, gently, quietly, like a blanket of soft mist drifting across the Thames. You don't have to do anything now, not even think, just breathe. A slow breath in and a slower breath out. Let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders, the way ancient fog once slid over the riverbanks of old Britannia. Tonight, we're going on a long journey. Not in a hurry, not with fanfare or swords or crowds, but with the slow rhythm of history, the kind of history that doesn't ask you to stay awake, yet somehow keeps you listening. You and I are going to travel back, far beyond the glass towers and the busy streets of modern London, past the royal pageantry, past Shakespeare's quill, past the medieval bells, past the Roman sandals, until we finally arrive at the very first moment the city even thought of being a city. And don't worry if you fall asleep halfway through the Romans or right when the Vikings start knocking on doors. London is used to being rebuilt. It'll still be there when you wake up. For the next 90 minutes, this won't be a lecture. It won't be a class. It won't even be a story in the traditional sense. It will be more like a slow river of time, moving without rush, carrying you along with gentle currents of memory, stone, smoke, and starlight. So let your eyelids become a little heavier, let your thoughts float a little looser, and allow the night to guide you backward and backward, until the bright noise of the present fades, and only the soft heartbeat of ancient earth remains. Close your eyes if you want, or keep them half open in that sleepy little way that says, I'm listening, but also, maybe not. Both are perfectly fine. London's story begins, and you're here for the first breath of it. Chapter 1, Before London Existed, a Land of Mist and Wet Grass. Before London had a name, before it had cobblestones, bridges, taverns, or the gentle rumble of double-decker buses, it was simply a quiet, misty stretch of earth, a place where the river breathed more loudly than the people. Imagine the Thames thousands of years ago, not the broad river you know today, lined with embankments and bright lights, but a softer, wilder creature. Its waters were colder, darker, coiling like a long silver ribbon through marsh and forest. Reeds whispered at its edges, otters slipped between shadows, and the morning mist hung so thick that even the sun had to clear its throat before shining through. Human life was here, but only lightly. Just footprints in damp soil, the faint smell of wood smoke, and a few scattered huts built from branches and hope. These early people, the ancestors of the Celts, didn't sit down one day and say, well, lads, I think this would be a great place for a metropolis. No. They were more concerned with basic things, warmth, food, and not being eaten by the occasional wolf who wandered by with questionable intentions. Their world was simple, a few families, modest farms, fishing lines cast into the river, and long nights when the wind rustled through oak leaves like distant whispers. But even in this simplicity, something about this place felt different. There was a quiet magnetism here, a gentleness in the way the land curved, a safety in the river's shallow bend, and a stillness that made people stay just a little longer than they had planned. Of course, nobody called it London. If you travelled back in time and asked one of those early Britons, "Excuse me, is this London?" they would probably look at you, blink a few times, and then go back to sharpening a stick or stirring a pot, thinking that perhaps you weren't feeling well. But beneath their simple routines, beneath the thick fog and quiet forests, the land itself was waiting. patient. Unhurried, almost as if it somehow knew that one day this gentle bend of the river would become the center of kings, of empire, of rebellion and renewal, of poetry and fire and steel. For now, though, it remained peaceful, green, untroubled, the kind of place where the loudest sound at dawn was a bird landing on a wet branch, or the long sigh of the river slipping past. Night after night, century after century, the Thames carried stories in silence, stories of rains that came and went, of animals migrating through the valley, of hunters watching the water sparkle under a pale moon. And the land waited. It waited through the Bronze Age. It waited through the Iron Age. It waited as tribes rose and fell, as the firelight of one generation dimmed and another took its place. Nothing hurried here. Nothing rushed. Even the fog moved as if it were considering each step. And perhaps, in that long, slow, patient way, the land was preparing for footsteps heavier than hunting boots, for voices louder than tribal songs, for the arrival of builders, engineers, soldiers. Men who would come wearing sandals and armor, who would look at this quiet little place and see not a marsh or a village, but the beginning of a city. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, let yourself rest in this ancient quiet. A London before London, where the world was soft and the night was long, and the only thing deciding the future was the slow, steady heartbeat of the earth. Chapter 2. Why the Romans chose this place. The story begins on the Thames. If you lie very still, you can almost hear it. The distant sound of sandals crunching on gravel, shields clinking softly like wind chimes, and the slightly irritated breathing of a Roman soldier who has been marching for far too long. The year is around 43 AD, a Roman legion, tired, muddy, and beginning to question all of their life decisions, has finally reached the River Thames. Britannia, to them, is the edge of the world. Cold, foggy, always damp, somewhere. The kind of place where the clouds seem permanently undecided about whether they want to rain or just linger. But Romans are Romans. And Romans don't just wander around, they build. They organize, they take one long dramatic look at a landscape and ask themselves, can we put a tax office here? Standing at the river's edge, they notice something interesting, The Thames is wide, yes, but right here, it narrows like a calm breath between two heartbeats. A crossing point. A perfect one. To the modern eye, it looks peaceful. Mist curling over gentle currents, soft mud underfoot. The occasional fish making life decisions below the surface. But to the Romans, this was strategy. This was geometry. This was destiny wrapped in damp grass. A river crossing meant roads. Roads meant trade. Trade meant taxes. And taxes meant Rome was very happy. So the soldiers squinted through the mist. The engineers scratched their chins. And one of them probably said something like, yes, this will do nicely. Let's build a bridge and pretend it was our idea all along. Of course, before anything could be built, they had to get across the river, which was not always straightforward. Imagine the scene, dozens of armored men trying to look heroic while quietly hoping the water isn't deeper than it looks. A few bold scouts step forward, testing the riverbed with spears like long, elegant selfie sticks. Someone mutters that Gaul was warmer, someone else misses their mother's cooking. But soon the Romans discover the truth. This river, at this exact bend, is fordable, shallow enough for marching feet, deep enough for cargo, perfect for a future bridge. A bridge that will later become the spine of a new settlement. A settlement that will become a city that will become a world capital, all because the river, in its quiet, unconcerned way, decided to curve gently here instead of there. The land around them is promising too, not exactly tropical. The Romans spend a little too much time pretending they don't mind the cold. But the soil is decent, the banks are stable, and there's enough open space to build the things Romans love most: forums, bathhouses, granaries, and a place to argue loudly about politics. And perhaps as the morning mist rose, and sunlight finally pushed through the clouds like a shy guest at a banquet, some Roman officer with an expensive helmet looked at the river and thought, this could be something. This could be important. Of course, they didn't know that the small decision to set up camp here would ripple through 2,000 years of history, that their wooden bridge would become the ancestor of every London bridge that followed, that their little settlement would one day hold millions of people in glittering lights, centuries of stories, and future travelers who fell asleep. Two tales told in soft voices. All they knew was that the river was calm, the crossing was good, and the ground beneath their feet felt like it was waiting for something to begin. And so, in this quiet corner of old Britannia, where reeds swayed in the breeze, and the sky smelled faintly of rain, the idea of London began to take shape. Not with grand speeches or thunderous fanfare, but with soldiers sighing in relief, and an engineer saying, "All right then, let's build." Chapter 3, 47 to 50, A.D., the birth of Londinium. In the quiet breath between two seasons, under a sky the colour of pale silver, the Romans decided it was time. A bridge was not enough. A crossing point was not enough. They wanted permanence. They wanted presence. They wanted a settlement that whispered, Rome was here, even at the edge of the world. And so, in the years around 47 to 50 AD, the work began. It started small, as all great cities do, with a few wooden posts driven into soft ground, a handful of tents, and a group of soldiers trying to pretend they weren't cold. The River Thames watched quietly. It had seen hunters, it had seen tribes, but it had never seen anything quite like Romans. A combination of discipline, ambition, and a slightly dramatic tendency to build things just because they could. The first structure was the bridge, a simple wooden one at first, not the majestic London Bridge of songs and legends, but a humble creation held together by rope, timber, and the stubborn willpower of men who really wanted to stop wading through icy water. Once the bridge stood firm, the settlement began to bloom around it, like a campfire growing warm enough to draw people closer. Engineers marked the streets with that very Roman love for right angles. Merchants followed, setting up stalls with pottery, cloth, wine, and anything else that could be sold. Passing soldiers or curious locals. Blacksmiths hammered metal into tools. Builders carried planks and stacked stones, and everywhere the smell of fresh-cut wood mixed with the scent of damp earth, and the occasional whiff of someone's lunch, which, knowing the Romans, was probably something stewed, spiced, and served with unnecessary confidence. The layout of early Londinium took shape: a main street running east to west, another slicing north to south, creating a tidy grid that would make any modern city planner shed a single grateful tear. A forum was planned. Because what is a Roman town without a place? Where people can argue passionately about taxes. A basilica rose beside it, a long hall for administration, courts, and the occasional important-looking meeting. Involving scrolls, gestures, and serious eyebrows, warehouses sprouted near the river, ready to store grain, wine, olive oil, and all the necessities of Roman life, including items the locals had never seen before, but politely pretended to recognize. And then there were the houses. Simple at first, wooden walls, thatched roofs, floors dusty with the footprints of builders who tracked in half the riverbank each morning. But even these humble homes held something new. A sense of order, a sense of design, a sense that this was not temporary. The Romans, in their confident way, didn't just build structures, they built statements. And as the weeks turned into months, Londinium began to hum with life. Children ran between half-finished walls, dogs barked at the unfamiliar clang of metal, and traders called out offers to anyone within earshot, including people clearly just trying to walk home. By the riverbank, small docks extended into the Thames, inviting boats from across the channel. The water, dark and smooth, carried reflections of lanterns swaying in the breeze, like tiny gold stars floating toward the horizon. At night, when the work stopped and the settlement finally exhaled, you could stand on the bridge and hear the faint murmurs of a city being born in its sleep. The crackle of a cooking fire, the shuffle of tired feet, the distant laugh of a soldier remembering home, even the soft creak of wood settling into the ground. Each sound was a thread weaving Londinium into existence. It was still small, still fragile, still young enough that a strong storm might have carried away half the rooftops, and possibly that one tent nobody bothered to secure properly. But it was there, a spark, a beginning. And though none of the people living in that humble riverside town could imagine the millions who would one day walk its streets, or the towers that would rise above the clouds, or the bridges that would stretch like steel ribbons across the Thames, the land remembered, the river remembered, and the first heartbeat of London echoed gently in the night, a quiet beginning, a small settlement, a name whispered into history, Londinium. Chapter 4. The largest city in Britannia. Londinium at its Roman peak. By the time a few decades had drifted by, Londinium was no longer a cluster of hopeful huts. Clinging politely to the riverbank, it had grown. Slowly at first, then confidently, and then with that unmistakable Roman flair that said, "We are absolutely staying here, so please make room." If you could float above the settlement in the late 1st century, hovering gently like a sleepy bird who hasn't quite committed to flapping its wings, you'd see a surprisingly organized patchwork of streets, roofs, and markets. The town grid stretched wider each year, its lines straight as if drawn by someone, with a deep emotional attachment to geometry. And at its heart, commanding both respect and foot traffic, was the Forum Dash Dash, a bustling centre of life where merchants bargained, magistrates pronounced judgments, and everyday people stood around discussing the weather. because that is apparently a timeless human tradition. The basilica towered over the square, its long shadow drifting across the marketplace like a slow-moving sundial. Inside, decisions were made, disputes settled, and an impressive amount of paperwork was completed, because the Romans invented bureaucracy and were unreasonably proud of it. Near the water, the port had become alive with motion. Ships from Gaul, Spain, Germania, and the far corners of the empire slid quietly into the docks, their hulls creaking softly as goods were unloaded, wine sealed in clay, amphorae, fine pottery, iron tools, olive oil packed so lovingly that you'd think each jug held the secret to happiness. The Thames, now lined with wooden quays, became a highway of trade, reflecting lanterns at night glittering with morning sun and carrying whispers of distant lands. Into the settling heart of Britannia, and Londinium grew richer, more crowded, more alive. There were bathhouses too, essential to Roman life and baffling to locals who still weren't entirely convinced. That daily bathing was necessary. But inside those warm, steamy rooms, soldiers relaxed, merchants schemed their next deal, and exhausted builders soaked their sore muscles, wondering quietly if Britannia would ever feel warm. The amphitheatre also arrived, a proud circle of stone and timber, where crowds gathered for games of performances and the occasional dramatic moment involving someone shouting, "I did not sign up for this." If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echo of excitement. The stamping of feet, the rising cheers, the soft rustle of cloaks settling over wooden benches. Even in a sleep story, you can sense the pulse of a city finding its rhythm. And then there were the homes. By now, many were built of stone and tile. Solid, warm, a clear sign that Londinium had outgrown its early anxieties and embraced its identity as the beating heart of Roman Britannia. Streets bustled with vendors singing prices, children darting between carts, dogs chasing after things only they understood, and the steady rumble of carts carrying supplies. From one corner of the city to another, the smell of fresh bread drifted from bakeries, the sound of metal rang from smithies, and somewhere, inevitably, a group of Roman officials discussed taxes with the enthusiasm of men who simply loved numbers more than is healthy. By the peak of the 2nd century, Londinium had up to 60,000 inhabitants, making it the largest city in Britannia. Bigger than Colchester, bigger than St. Albans, big enough that a tired traveller entering the city after a long road would feel a kind of awe, mixed with a tiny desire to take a nap before checking into a tavern. At night, Londinium softened. The noise dimmed. The markets folded in on themselves like closing petals. Only the river kept murmuring, a constant companion carrying reflections of torchlight to the far reaches of empire. And if you stood on the bridge feeling the faint rocking of the wooden planks, you might sense what the Romans felt that this city this once quiet bend of the Thames, had become something remarkable. Orderly, yet restless. Disciplined, yet alive. A place where the pulse of Rome beat clearly, even as fog rolled in from the marshlands. Londinium was thriving, growing, shining in its own quiet way. A city standing strong, though not for long. For just beyond the horizon, in a world of anger and flame, a queen was preparing to ride. But that will come in the next chapter. For now, let the lights of Roman London glow softly in your imagination. A warm, gentle constellation settled along the river's edge. Chapter 5. 60 to 61 A.D. The Wrath of Boudica. There are moments in history when a peaceful night suddenly feels unsettled, when the soft glow of torches over a quiet city meets the distant tremor of someone riding toward destiny. And in the year 60 or 61 AD, that tremor belonged to Boudica, the warrior queen of the Iceni, a woman whose name, even today, echoes like thunder wrapped in royal purple. But in this sleep story, we will let her arrive gently. Imagine the calm before she came. Londinium resting beneath a pale dawn. Merchants opening shutters, bakers carrying warm loaves, the river murmuring its slow, ancient song. Everything feels still. Ordinary, almost cozy. And then a rumble, not loud, not sudden, more like the earth clearing its throat politely. Before delivering bad news, stories travel fast, whispers faster. And soon the people of Londinium begin to hear that Boudica has risen in revolt, and she is not in a particularly forgiving mood. We often imagine Romans as calm and composed, but in this moment some of them were absolutely rethinking every decision that led them to Britannia. If you listen carefully, you might hear a centurion muttering, "I knew we should have gone to Spain instead," as he tries to sound brave. Boudica's anger was not small, it was not quiet, it was not the kind of emotion you could soothe with a cup of tea and a reassuring pat on the shoulder. It was the kind of anger born from injustice, humiliation, and a desire to reclaim dignity. With the force of a storm. Her army grew as she marched. Tribes united, families rallied. The ground felt different beneath their feet, charged, electric, unstoppable. When she approached Londinium, the city knew it could not hold. It wasn't fortified yet. Its defences were still dreams, lines on a future blueprint, not walls of stone. And so the Roman governor, Suetonius, made a decision that would haunt the city for generations. He abandoned Londinium to save the army. The citizens had no choice but to flee. Some hid in forests, others slipped away onto boats, their hearts pounding like drums in the fog. Some refused to leave, hoping their homes might be spared. They would not be. Then Boudica arrived. You might expect fury to enter like an explosion, but in this sleep version, and imagine it as a slow red tide, a wave of determination, a presence larger than one person, or even one nation. Her warriors poured into the empty streets, torches held high, hair wild in the wind. And in that moment, Londinium, the proud Roman town, with its straight roads and busy markets, was undone. Flames rose, timbers cracked, smoke curled into the sky. in long, dark ribbons. The city that had grown so confidently was swallowed by the heat of rebellion. But even here, even in destruction, there is a strange softness in the way history unfolds. For the fire did not last forever. The smoke eventually cleared. The river continued to whisper at the shore, and beneath the ash the land remained, waiting once again for someone to rebuild. Boudica's fury ran its course. Rome would strike back, the rebellion would fall, and Londinium, bruised, burned, but unbroken, would rise again. Sometimes cities are like people. They grow, they prosper, they falter, they collapse, and then, with quiet resilience, they breathe in and begin again. So let the flames of Londinium fade softly in your imagination. Let the ashes settle. Let the night heal the smoke-filled sky. Because in the next chapter, as history always promises, London will return from the fire. Chapter 6. The Roman City Reborn, Rising from the Ashes. In the quiet after a storm, there is a strange kind of silence. Not empty, not lifeless, but filled with the soft breathing of things preparing to return. After Boudica's uprising, Londinium lay in ruins. Charred beams jutted from the earth like broken ribs. Streets were buried under ash. The air still carried a faint, smoky memory of everything the city had lost. But Rome was not a civilization that surrendered to fires, rebellions, or bad weather. Although Britannia's reign certainly tried, instead the Romans looked at the smouldering ruins with their usual unshakable confidence and said something along the lines of, "Well, this seems like a good opportunity to build something even bigger." And so they began. It started with clearing the wreckage. Slowly, methodically, as if brushing dust off an old, beloved statue. Workers moved through the empty streets, lifting beams, smoothing earth, and placing the first stones of what would become a new, stronger city. This time, Londinium wouldn't just return, it would evolve. Architects laid out wider streets, engineers reinforced foundations, builders raised walls from sturdier stone. And as each structure rose, Londinium breathed again. Faint at first, like embers flickering in the dark, then steadier like a fire finding its shape. The new forum and basilica were grander than before, echoing with footsteps and conversations. That sounded strangely hopeful, even beneath Britannia's eternal drizzle. Warehouses returned to the riverbank, but larger, ready to store more goods, for ships arriving from across the empire. The port grew busier, louder, and infinitely more determined. Not to let history repeat itself. And somewhere among the building crews, you can almost imagine a Roman foreman looking at a blueprint and saying, no, but make it double the size just in case someone tries to burn it again. Stone replaced timber. Tile replaced thatch. Order replaced chaos. By the end of the 1st century, Londinium was shining again, a phoenix with sandals. but the greatest symbol of Rome's persistence, came in the form of a decision so bold that even the river seemed to pause and listen. They built a new bridge, stronger, wider, resting on mighty piers, driven deep into the Thames. A bridge that said, "Cross here, trade here, live here, the world gathers at this river." And the world listened. Merchants returned their boats gliding across the Thames, with the quiet confidence of travelers following a familiar path home. Families rebuilt their lives. Children played among newly carved stones, filling the city with laughter so bright that even the ruins of the past seemed less shadowed. At night, Londinium glowed again. Soft lanterns flickering along the quays, gold light drifting over the water, like fireflies on a slow tide. The city was no longer recovering. It was thriving, growing, stretching its limbs as if awakening from a long, restless dream. And beneath all this rebirth, Rome made one more move, a quiet promise carved into stone. They began planning a wall that would protect the city, define it, strengthen it, and still be standing in pieces nearly 2,000 years later. But that is a story for another chapter. For now, rest with the image of Londinium rising, reborn from ash, its streets warm with lantern light, its people carrying hope like a small flame, cupped gently in their hands. The city had survived, and soon it would become something far greater. Chapter 7. 3rd to 4th century, a great city slowing down. Cities, like people, don't always grow in straight lines. Sometimes they surge forward, sometimes they stumble, and sometimes they slow down, as if pausing for a long, thoughtful breath. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, Londinium had already lived several lives. It had been born, burned, rebuilt, and sculpted into a proud Roman jewel, glimmering beside the Thames. But now, its brightness softened, its pace gentled. The city did not collapse. Nothing so dramatic. It simply exhaled. Roman power across the empire was beginning to stretch thin. Frontiers trembled, armies grew tired, emperors came and went, with an enthusiasm that worried everyone, and the world felt slightly less certain than it had a century before. Londinium reflected that uncertainty in quiet, subtle ways. The market still bustled in the mornings, fishmongers arranging their catch, spice merchants inhaling the scents of distant lands, traders discussing prices in low, steady voices. But if you listened closely, the hum of the city felt different. Not silent, just a little slower, like someone walking home after a long day. The grand Roman buildings still stood. The baths, the basilica, the amphitheatre, though some showed the first soft wrinkles of age. Tiles slipped, walls weathered, a few doors creaked in the wind, as though practicing their spooky sound effects for a future ghost tour. And above all, this circling the city like a protective embrace, rose the London Wall --, completed around the early 3rd century, a monumental ring of stone stretching nearly 3 kilometers. It stood tall, firm, and perhaps a little smug, as if whispering, "I am absolutely not falling over anytime soon." But inside that wall, the people felt the shifting tides of Rome. Taxes rose, supplies travelled slower. Some villas changed owners. Others were abandoned quietly, their courtyards taken over by patient, opportunistic weeds, who had been waiting decades for this moment. Still, Londinium did not fade in sadness. It simply settled into a calmer rhythm. Imagine walking through the city at dusk. Shops closing their shutters. Workers strolling home in pairs. The river catching the last light of day and turning it into a long, molten ribbon. Somewhere, a dog barks softly. At absolutely nothing in particular. A timeless London tradition. The air carries hints of life, fresh bread from a tavern oven, smoke drifting from simple hearths, and the earthy scent of the riverbank. After a long afternoon tide. And above it all, a silence grows. Not the silence of abandonment, but the peace of a city. Finding a slower tempo. By the 4th century, Londinium had pockets of emptiness. Gardens overgrew old structures. Workshops moved. Streets, once overflowing with carts and voices, became quieter, their cobblestones worn smooth by fewer footsteps. It's the kind of atmosphere where you could walk down the main road and hear your own thoughts echo, or perhaps hear the soft flap of a pigeon's wings as it goes about its very serious daily business. And yet, the city still lived, still breathed, still waited. Londinium was not dying. It was preparing dash, though no one could see it then, for a transformation so large that even the river would hold its breath. Rome was weakening, change was coming, and the people of Londinium could sense a shift in the wind, even if they couldn't name it. History was quietly turning a page. Soon, the empire would withdraw, the Roman standards would vanish from Britain, and Londinium, once the proud capital of Roman Britannia, would enter a long, haunting sleep. But not yet. For now, it rests peacefully. Its lanterns flickering, its stones cooling in the night, its heartbeat slow, steady, and patient, waiting for what comes next. Chapter 8. 410 AD, Rome withdraws and London becomes a ghost city. There are moments in the story of a city that feel like the end of a long exhale. A fading note at the end of a song. A candle slowly dimming. Until only the memory of its warmth remains. The year is around 410 AD, and Rome, mighty, sprawling, complicated Rome, is in trouble. Far away on the continent, barbarian armies press against its borders, emperors rise and fall like flickering flames, and the great machine of empire begins to sputter in ways that worry even the bravest citizen. When a desperate plea for help arrives from Britain, asking Rome to send legions, reinforcements, anyone, The imperial response is quiet, almost apologetic. They're not coming. They can't come.
Britain, Londinium, this far-off province with its fog and rain,
and famously unpredictable weather, will have to fend for itself. And so, one by one, the Roman soldiers marched away, not dramatically, not in panic, just tired, homesick, carrying their armor, shields, and the unmistakable look of men thinking, "I really hope nobody invades while we're gone." When the last banners vanished beyond the horizon, Londinium stood still, silent, listening to the soft echo of footsteps that would not return. Without the legions, without the flow of Roman money supplies, trade networks, and the comforting structure of empire, the city began to fade. Not all at once, but slowly, like mist dissolving in morning light. Workshops closed first, the clang of smiths quieted. The chatter of merchants grew thin.
The amphitheatre fell silent,
its wooden benches gathering dust, watched over by a pigeon or two, who immediately declared themselves the new managers. Homes were abandoned, not out of fear, but necessity. People moved to smaller towns, to farms, to wherever life still made sense. Even the mighty Forum lost its voice. Scrolls lay untouched, counters gathered cobwebs. The basilica's great hall, once filled with lore, noise, and footsteps, became a cavern of echoes and drifting dust. Soon plants crept into the edges of the streets, as if the wild world was politely asking, "Are you using this? No? Okay, we'll just take a little corner." Roofs sank,
walls cracked,
doorways sagged like tired shoulders. By the late 400s, Londinium was no longer a city. It was a memory of one. Travellers passing by spoke of a strange, empty place. Silent stone outlines, where houses once stood, streets that led nowhere, and the skeletal remains of Roman grandeur, half swallowed by earth and ivy.
Some called it a ghost town.
Some said it was cursed. Some simply shrugged and walked a little faster. But in this sleep story, it isn't frightening. It's peaceful. Imagine drifting through an abandoned Londinium at dusk. The soft crunch of grass where pavement used to be,
the gentle brush of wind against broken walls,
the way the Thames reflects pink twilight as it slides patiently past the ruins. There is no fear here, only stillness, only the long rest of a city waiting for its next dream. The London wall, strong and stubborn as ever, still stands, its stones determined to remain upright,
even if everything else has given up.
A few wildflowers bloom in its cracks as if decorating a sleeping giant. Sometimes a fox trots through the empty forum, its paws silent on the mossy ground. Sometimes a traveller shelters for the night, in what used to be a townhouse, listening to wind drift through hollow doorways. And sometimes, in the hush between midnight and dawn, the ruins seem to breathe.
Not with life, but with potential.
Because even abandoned cities do not disappear, they wait.
And Londinium was waiting for centuries.
Quiet, forgotten, surrounded by reeds and shadows. and the slow, steady pulse of the river. But soon, new footsteps will come.
New voices.
A new people with a new language and a very different idea of what life beside the Thames could be.
Londinium sleeps, but London's next chapter is already stirring.
Chapter 9, 600 to 700 AD. The Anglo-Saxons build a new settlement, Lundenwic. History rarely brings a city back to life, in the same place,
in the same shape,
or with the same people. When Londinium fell into its long, peaceful slumber, the world around it continued to turn. Slowly, quietly, like a wheel creaking through centuries. By the time the 600s arrived, new footsteps approached the Thames, lighter, less armoured, with a rhythm untouched by Roman discipline. These were the Anglo-Saxons. Farmers, traders, craftsmen. People who valued good land, good rivers, and the simple comfort
of building a home where the world felt calm. When they reached the silent ruins of Londinium,
they paused, looked around, tilted their heads slightly, and said, in essence, nice walls, but a bit creepy. Let's not live here.
And so instead of moving into the old Roman city,
they built a new one, a fresh settlement at just 1 kilometre to the west, close enough to the Thames, but far enough that the abandoned Roman ruin didn't loom over their daily lives like a giant stone history lecture. They named it Lundenwic. The trading settlement near London, as if acknowledging politely
that the old city still existed,
but also gently suggesting that it should please stay asleep for now. Lundenwic was nothing like the regimented grid of Roman Londinium. Where the Romans loved straight lines, the Anglo-Saxons embraced curves.
Where the Romans built in stone, the Anglo-Saxons built in timber, wattle, and thatch.
The new settlement felt organic, like a village that grew, the way trees grow, following sunlight and convenience. Rather than mathematical pride, imagine walking through Lundenwic on a soft morning. The smell of wood smoke lingers in the air. Chickens stroll across open pathways. As if they pay rent, children splash in puddles. Fishermen haul nets from the river, their boats pulled high onto the muddy shore. The market is the heart of everything. Traders unload baskets of salt, honey, grain, beads from across the North Sea, and the occasional imported luxury. That causes half the village to gather.
I mumble approvingly. If you listen closely,
you'll hear voices mixing Old English, bits of Frisian, traces of Norse.
Languages settling together, like neighbours sharing a fire.
Lundenwic isn't grand. It isn't monumental.
It doesn't have a forum,
a basilica, or a bathhouse, though many of its citizens might quietly benefit from the idea of regular bathing. But it has something the ruins of Londinium had lost. Life. Warm, messy, everyday life. Shops made of timber. Workshops filled with wool and pottery. Cows grazing near open fields. Smoke drifting lazily from hearths. Voices rising together, in rhythm with the river,
and all the while
the Thames dash dash, faithful as ever, continues its slow, shimmering journey. beside the new town carrying boats to and from the sea. At night, Lundenwic is gentle. Lanterns flicker behind thin wooden walls. Dogs curl up near doorways. The air hums with quiet conversation. As families settle into sleep, unaware that they are laying foundations for the future London. Even the ruins of old Londinium, just a short walk away, seem to sense the shift. Now and then a curious Anglo-Saxon might wander through the broken Roman streets, picking up a shard of pottery, wondering who once held it. The past and present exist side by side, one silent, one alive. And slowly, Lundenwic grows, thrives, becomes a hub of trade along the Thames. A place where merchants from across the North Sea arrive with goods, stories, and accents that drift like music across the docks. But history, in its unpredictable rhythm, never lets a city remain still for long. Beyond the horizon, across rough, salt waves, a new sound is gathering. Oars slicing through water, voices shouting in unfamiliar tongues, shields flashing in northern sun. Lundenwic has risen, but soon it will be tested.
For on the seas the Vikings are rowing closer.
Chapter 10. 8th to 9th century. The Vikings arrive, oars breaking the city's sleep. Some dangers arrive with thunder. Some arrive with armies, and some arrive with the soft, rhythmic splash of oars cutting through cold northern water.
It is the 8th century,
and Lundenwic, the Anglo-Saxon town by the Thames,
is peaceful.
Simple, sleepy even. People go to bed thinking about fishing nets, or market prices, or whether the neighbours' chickens have wandered into their garden again. But across the North Sea, something is stirring. Long, slender ships, sleek as predators, swift as arrows, glide over grey waves. Their sails billow like restless ghosts. And at the front of each vessel, a carved wooden dragon stares ahead with a look that says, "We are absolutely not here for a friendly visit." These are the Vikings.
Their arrival is not loud at first.
In the quiet dawn, you might only hear the faintest hint of a rhythm. Oars dipping, shh, shh, shh.
A steady heartbeat of intention. But to a sleeping town,
Even that can feel ominous. Imagine Lundenwic at sunrise, fog drifting over the fields, smoke curling lazily from breakfast fires, roosters announcing a new day. With the confidence of creatures who have not read the news. Then a look out at the riverbank, blinks, leans forward, blinks again, and wonders quietly if the boats he sees are real, or just a side effect of waking up too quickly. But the ships come closer and closer, and suddenly the stillness of the Thames is broken by men leaping from long ships. Tall, fierce, broad-shouldered, with beards that look like they've survived. A minimum of 4 major weather events. They charge toward the town,
not with stealth,
but with a kind of unapologetic enthusiasm,
that makes you think they probably skipped breakfast.
and are now compensating for it. The Anglo-Saxons, understandably, are alarmed. Some flee,
Some hide, some try to defend their homes.
with the kind of bravery that deserves a warm blanket and a long nap. The Vikings move fast. They take what they want. They burn what stands in their way. And in a matter of hours, the quiet rhythm of Lundenwic is replaced by the chaos of invasion. But this is a sleep story, so let's soften the edges. Imagine the scene later that evening. The smoke drifting into the sky. Like thin grey ribbons, the Thames reflecting flames, with a haunting, mirror-like calm. The sounds have quieted. The day is over. And a strange stillness settles again, as if the world needs a moment to process what just happened. The Vikings do not stay forever. They come, they plunder, they leave like tourists with extremely poor manners. But they return and return again, and each visit, each slash of an oar through the Thames, pushes Lundenwic a little closer to a difficult truth. Living by the river is wonderful until the river brings unwelcome guests.
By the late 800s,
The threat becomes too great. Lundenwic cannot defend itself. Its open layout, so warm, so human, so village-like, is also vulnerable. And somewhere among the Anglo-Saxon leaders, a thought begins to form. Perhaps it's time to go back to the old Roman city. The one with stone walls. The one that has been waiting quietly for centuries. The one that stood through storms, rebellions, and the long sleep of abandonment. A city doesn't die just because it falls silent,
sometimes it rests.
until someone needs it again. And soon Lundeniu --
The Roman ruins will awaken, for a king is coming.
a thoughtful one, a patient one, a man who listens to the land
And sees not ruins,
but opportunity.
his name is Alfred.
And in the next chapter, he will return London to its ancient walls and breathe life back into its stones. Chapter 11. 886. Alfred the Great leads the people back inside the Roman walls. Sometimes a city needs a hero, not a warrior with blazing eyes, or a conqueror with a raised sword, but someone who can look at ruins and see a future instead of a grave. In 886,
That someone was Alfred the Great. Alfred was not just a king.
he was a thinker, a strategist, a patient man in a world that didn't always appreciate patience. He read books, he studied histories, and he took notes, possibly more notes than any medieval king truly needed. When he looked at the map of his troubled kingdom, he saw that the Anglo-Saxon town of Lundenwic, open, exposed, endlessly vulnerable,
Could no longer defend itself.
against the sudden, forceful visits of Viking raiders with impeccable rowing skills.
And terrible hospitality.
Meanwhile,
Just a short walk away behind ancient Roman walls.
that had weathered centuries, like a seasoned grandparent watching the drama of younger generations, lay the sleeping city of Londinium. Stone, strong, waiting. Alfred did not hesitate. He gathered his people, families, traders, craftsmen, children, clutching wool cloaks, and led them toward the silent Roman ruins, their footsteps soft on the soil, as if approaching a cathedral. When they reached the old walls, the scene must have felt almost sacred. The London Wall towered above them, weathered, cracked, decorated with ivy like nature's quiet embroidery, but still standing, still holding,
still whispering,
"I endured, I can endure again."
Alfred nodded at
Perhaps with a small smile, as if greeting an old friend. Here, he likely thought, is where London begins anew. And so he set to work. The Anglo-Saxons entered the Roman fortifications, their voices echoing softly through forgotten streets that had not heard laughter in centuries.
They cleared debris, they repaired stone.
They built wooden homes inside the ancient grid, their structures leaning comfortably. Against the wisdom of Roman foundations, the new settlement was named Lundenwic, the fortified London. Lundenwic, the open riverside town, gradually faded away, leaving behind only archaeological hints and a faint, wistful memory of chickens wandering freely through streets. Inside the Roman walls, life began to pulse again. Blacksmiths reopened their forges, sparks rising into the dusk, like tiny fire spirits celebrating the city's rebirth. Markets returned, their tables piled with grain, wool, smoked fish, and small everyday treasures that make a town feel alive. Children played among the old ruins as if they had always belonged there, darting between pillars, giggling from behind weathered arches, unaware that their playground was once a Roman administrative hall where serious men debated very serious things. And Alfred, he watched it all with quiet satisfaction.
He fortified the bridges.
He established defences, he set laws and protections, he placed a royal official in charge to ensure order and trade would flourish again. The Thames, faithful witness to every transformation, reflected lantern lights from the new settlement, as if welcoming London back from its long sleep. At night, the walls glowed warmly under torchlight, a ring of protection, surrounding families who no longer feared the sudden shout of raiders or the thundering arrival of long ships. Inside the walls, one could finally rest, and in that rest, the seeds of a great city were quietly taking root. London Not Londinium, the Roman city, nor Lundenwic, the riverside town, but London, reborn with purpose, anchored by stone, guided by a thoughtful king, and warmed by the breath of its people. The city's heartbeat, long silent, began to steady, to strengthen, to grow. And beyond the walls, across the river's gentle shimmer, a new dawn waited, for in the next chapter, London will rise even further, not just as a fortified refuge, but as the beating heart of an emerging nation. Chapter 12, 10th to 11th century. London becomes England's largest economic centre. Cities grow in surprising ways. Some rise with thunder, some with conquest, and some with the quiet rhythm of boats docking at dawn. By the 10th century,
London, or Lundenwic, nestled safely within its Roman walls, had begun to hum again.
Not with the rigid discipline of Rome or the rustic charm of the Anglo-Saxon village, but with a new kind of life, the steady heartbeat of trade. It started at the river. The Thames, always patient, always watching, became the grand highway between London and the rest of the known world. Each morning, its surface shimmered with sails from Flanders, Normandy, Germany, Scandinavia. A parade of wooden hulls gliding across soft currents, as though the river itself were ushering them toward the city. As ships approached the docks, you could hear it, a low, gentle chorus of life. The clunk of cargo being unloaded, the splash of rope hitting water,
the muffled shouts of sailors who had very strong opinions
about where the barrels should be stacked. London grew rich on wool, soft, warm, endlessly useful. It became the lifeline of English economy. Bags of raw fleece arrived from the countryside, were sorted, traded, loaded again, and shipped to markets far across the sea, where continental weavers waited impatiently, with their looms and their gossip. And because wool was profitable, everything else followed. Markets expanded. Colourful, noisy, chaotic in the most charming way.
Fishmongers yelling prices,
Craftsmen displaying pots so beautifully glazed, you'd almost forget they were meant for stew. Metal workers hammering out tools with sparks that looked like tiny fireflies, trying to escape into the morning air. Between the stands, you'd find spices, leather, honey, wine, and occasionally an item so strange that the entire street gathered around just to debate what it might possibly be. London wasn't just growing, it was becoming essential. Travellers wrote about it. Kings eyed it with interest. Merchants spoke its name like a promise of wealth. By the time the thousands arrived, London had surpassed ancient Winchester, the old royal centre, and become the largest city in England. Its population expanded, its houses multiplied, its streets buzzed with voices from England, Denmark, Normandy, and everywhere in between. Even the Thames seemed to swell with pride. At night, the markets closed, but the glow remained. Soft lanterns flickering behind shutters, casting warm rectangles of gold. Onto the cobblestones, the sound of the river, mingled with distant laughter, the clank of a tavern mug and the rhythmic creak of docks settling into the tide. It was peaceful, alive, comforting dash, like the city was tucking itself in, content with a full day's work. And yet, for all its calm, London was also becoming powerful. Kings visited more often. Courts assembled within its walls. Coin mints began operating, stamping currency that travelled the length of the kingdom. Documents from the time mention London again and again as an economic jewel,
a strategic stronghold,
a place whose voice carried weight in council halls. Even the Vikings, who had once treated the Thames like a nautical shortcut to trouble, and now sometimes came not as raiders, but as traders drawn to London's markets,
like moths to a warm flame.
Though occasionally still forgetting, that setting things on fire is not the correct way to greet merchants. By the mid-11th century, London was no longer the town that returned. It was the heart of England beating stronger with each passing day.
And the world noticed.
Across the Channel, a young duke named William of Normandy watched the growing city with the thoughtful expression of someone making a plan that would change everything. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, let the image of London settle softly in your mind, a city of markets and masts of wool and wine, of lanterns glowing like small suns,
behind stone walls older than memory.
London is rising, and the world is turning toward it. Chapter 13. 1066, William the Conqueror, and the birth of London as the kingdom's capital.
Every great city has a moment,
A single turning point. When its future becomes undeniable, when it stops being simply a place to live, and becomes the beating heart of something larger. For London at that moment arrived in 1066.
The year begins peacefully enough.
Merchants bargaining over wool, ships bobbing along the Thames, children chasing each other around market stalls like enthusiastic little tornadoes. But across the Channel in Normandy, a man watches the horizon with the expression of someone who has absolutely made up his mind.
His name is William, Duke of Normandy,
A serious man with a serious beard and an even more serious plan to claim the English throne, which he believes was promised to him. And so, as summer fades, William launches an invasion fleet, their sails catching the wind like pale wings lifting off the sea. Meanwhile, in England, King Harold rushes south after defeating another threat in the north. His soldiers are weary, their legs ache. They've walked so far that even their shadows look tired. But there is no time. At Hastings, Harold meets William. The battle is fierce and history-changing, and as fate has written, Harold falls.
England stands
On the edge of transformation. But our story tonight
is not the battle.
It is what happens after. William begins marching toward London. The city braces, nervous, uncertain, its future shivering like candlelight in the wind. The Londoners know their walls are strong, but not strong enough to withstand a determined Norman army. With a talent for siege warfare and an unsettling enthusiasm for building castles,
So they wait and they watch.
but William does not march straight toward the city gates. Instead, he circles London, strategically, calmly, cutting supply routes, capturing nearby towns, pressing the city.
Like a slow tightening ring.
It is a gentle kind of pressure, but pressure all the same. Inside the walls, London begins to understand. Resistance would mean destruction. Submission might mean survival, even opportunity. And so, in the soft hush of late autumn, the leaders of London make their choice.
They open the gates.
William enters not in triumphal roar, but in measured, deliberate dignity. The Thames glimmers beside him. Lanterns sway in the cold breeze. The city, vast and humming with life, stands before him, like a giant waiting to join its destiny. In Westminster on Christmas Day, 1066, William is crowned King of England. During the ceremony, the crowd cheers loudly, so loudly that Norman guards outside mistake the joyful applause for a riot
and begin setting nearby houses on fire.
In a panic, it is chaotic,
It is dramatic. It is extremely medieval.
but it is also the moment
When London becomes something new, not just the largest city,
not just an economic hub, but the central seat of power, the place where kings are crowned, where laws are shaped, where the fate of a kingdom begins its long march through centuries. William knows the city's importance,
he respects its wealth and its influence and
its potential, and he honors it. In the most Norman way possible, he builds a fortress. A massive one, cold, stone, unshakable. The White Tower, the first part of what we now call the Tower of London. It rises beside the river like a stern guardian watching the city, watching the tides, watching the future. Its thick walls whisper, "This is the seat of power now. This is the heart of the realm." Under Norman rule, London grows even faster.
more merchants,
More houses,
more ships weaving across the Thames,
like threads stitching the city to every corner of Europe. Languages mingle.
customs blend,
The skyline begins to change.
but more than anything,
London becomes the capital. Not by law,
not by decree,
but by gravity. The natural pull of wealth, people, and influence.
toward one bright point.
And from this moment on, through centuries of kings and queens, plagues and fires, glory and heartbreak, London will not lose that place. The city has risen.
Awakened, claimed its purpose.
What began as a Roman crossing, what survived fire, abandonment, and invasion, now stands as the center of a kingdom. And, one day, an empire. Let that image settle gently in your mind. The year 1066, the river glimmering in winter light, the newly crowned king in Westminster, and the White Tower, lifting its pale stone walls into the cold December air. London, finally and fully becoming London. Chapter 14. Closing a gentle goodnight. London's 2,000-year journey to becoming the heart of England. The story of London, which began with the soft bend of a river,
and the quiet footsteps of ancient tribes, has now crossed 2,000 years. To reach the moment where we rest tonight,
close your eyes, or let them half close in that comfortable way, where the world starts fading into a gentle blur. Think back to where we began. A land of fog and forest where the Thames whispered softly to no one in particular. Then the Romans came, with bridges, sandals, straight roads, and a desire to build things. In perfect right angles, Londinium rose, burned, rose again, grew into a shining city of stone. Then came silence, the long sleep of a place.
left behind by empire,
but not forgotten by time. From that stillness, the Anglo-Saxons arrived, with wooden houses, markets, and the friendly chaos of village life. Lundenwic blossomed, then trembled, under the shadow of Viking sails. And so, with the steady wisdom of a quiet king, Alfred led the people back into the Roman walls, awakening the sleeping city and giving it the shape
that would carry it toward greatness.
Trade returned. Wealth followed. London grew. Dash, dash. Bright, busy, rhythmic, the pulse of a rising England. And finally,
in the winter of 1066,
William the Conqueror stood beneath the high arches of Westminster, took the crown, and anchored London
as the heart of a new kingdom. 2,000 years, from riverbank to capital,
from fire to stone, from silence to power. And somehow, through all of it, the river stayed. The Thames watched everything. The children of the Celts, the sandals of the Romans, the axes of the Vikings, the banners of the Normans, even now
you can imagine it flowing quietly in the dark,
carrying echoes of footsteps long gone and the soft glow of the city that grew along its banks. Tonight, you have walked through every chapter, from mist to empire to ruin to rebirth. And now the journey rests. Let the story settle inside you, like a lantern dimming, like the last ripple on the river.
Like the hush that falls over London when even the city
decides to sleep. May your night be gentle. May your dreams be warm. And may the soft heartbeat of ancient London carry you into peaceful rest. Good night. From the Thames,
from the stones,
from the centuries, and from the city that learned to rise again and again. Good night, my friend.